I now know the two teams that are in the Super Bowl.
The Only Allegra subscribed for 3 months, saying, I was talking to my dad last night and told him I've been watching TYT regularly with John Adarola, and he said, oh, I see his shows too, he's really hot. My dad is gay. I was surprised and I was like, awesome, I think he's hot too. Good for you, John. Hey, I'm just glad I can bring families together. Thank you. So many times I say things just because I know Brett will hate it. At least you didn't say help families come together. God, we're never gonna be professional again. I'm gonna throw out my ties. I still have ties. Who am I kidding?
I now know the two teams that are in the Super Bowl. I now know the two teams that are in the Super Bowl.
Welcome, friends. You're watching The Young Turks with Anna Kasparian and John Adarola, which could only mean one thing. It's Wednesday. We're gonna hear the damage report, not just in the morning with the actual damage report show on this network, but we're gonna get the damage report here on the main show. John, it's always a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here. It's a glorious
it's funny because like we're genuinely friends, so it always feels a little awkward when I treat you as if like, you're just some colleague that, it's a pleasure to have you on today.
Like, from my podcast.
Thanks for doing the show, friend.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we were talking before the show. We'll probably talk after the show. This is just part of our talking.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's been a really slow news day, so I don't really know what I'm just kidding. Obviously, it's been jam-packed. Donald Trump has been impeached for the second time, so props to him. He's making history. So we'll give you all the details on that and show you some of the speeches that were given on the House floor. Later in the show, we'll also discuss some pretty awful decisions made in the Supreme Court. This is the kind of story that's gonna kind of, not get a lot of attention considering all of the other Trump-related news, but I think it's important to share details about what else is happening in the country. So we'll talk about that later. But for now, let's get to the impeachment story. Lots of big updates on that, and a lot of shocking updates actually. So the House of Representatives has voted to officially impeach Donald Trump on one article of impeachment regarding his incitement of insurrection. Now, unlike the first time that Donald Trump was impeached in 2019, today we saw 10 Republicans vote in favor of impeachment, which is a big deal. Now, this is a historical event, not only because of the fact that Donald Trump has been impeached 2 times, the first president to be impeached 2 times, but this is the most bipartisan impeachment, which is an interesting way to look at this, especially when you consider what happened last week with these insurrectionists rioting in the Capitol, and then you look at the high volume of Republicans who are still serving as apologists for Donald Trump and his, incredibly violent rhetoric, which not only incited violence last week. Let's be clear. Donald Trump's rhetoric has incited violence in this country in so many different cases, beginning with the hate march in Charlottesville. You have the Tree of Life synagogue. You have the mass shooting in El Paso. You have Cesar Sayoc sending bombs to members of the media and Democratic politicians. Let's not pretend as if we don't know what's been going on in this country for the last 4 years. Donald Trump has been inciting violence, and this may be the first time that he's actually paying some consequences for it. But before I give you some more details on how this all went down yesterday, I wanted to get your thoughts, John.
Yeah, it's great that it is happening. It's going to be made a lot more great if there's anything that actually comes of it in terms of conviction and all of that. Just being impeached again is something. It sends a signal. The fact that it's the most bipartisan. I think people said he's now been impeached as much as all other presidents combined, which is historic. I think I'm still counting all the votes, but he might have as many members of his own party voting for it as like all of the others combined. I'm not sure about that one. That's big, but if that is where it ends, then I don't know how much more, deterrent power it has than the first impeachment, which didn't change much behavior. It's great to have the 10. Sorry, it looked like you were about to say something.
No, finish your thought because I do have a response to what you said.
Yeah, it's good to have the 10 crossed over so that we can say that this is an actual bipartisan thing. It's good to get them on the record, although they're on the record in like literally the last week of this whole Trump experience that we've had. You still had 95% of Republicans in the House saying, yeah, no, add up all those things Anna was saying and now add the incitement to the attack. And the attack is the single worst part of a multi-month effort to effectively end democratic elections for president in America. So it's the worst part of a much bigger issue. And 95% of Republicans in the House were like, no, that's totally cool. Or I think it's bad, but let's not do something crazy like impeaching him, that's the exact same thing as I think it's okay.
Right, exactly. I mean, most Republican lawmakers who are against impeachment are like, well, what he did was really bad. It was really bad. But I mean, like impeachment, does that really make any sense? He only has a week left in office. And so maybe we should do a censure. No, look, this isn't about removing Donald Trump from office. Clearly, he only has a week left. The two main points to take away from this impeachment is number one, it's meant to serve as a deterrent so people understand that there are consequences for inciting violence the way that Donald Trump has been doing. And then number two, it's an effort to prevent him from running for federal office again. Of course, there have been so many headlines regarding Trump's plans to run for president in 2024. If he is impeached and then also convicted in the Senate, he cannot do that. And so the update to this story is also the fact that Mitch McConnell, who we learned yesterday is actually in favor of these impeachment proceedings, this was reported by the New York Times, is not going to have the Senate reconvene in order to hear this trial, in order to either convict or exonerate Donald Trump. And at first I was irritated by that, but then I kind of stopped and thought about it. With Mitch McConnell and the majority of Republicans in the Senate, I just don't trust them to convict Donald Trump. So the trial is likely to happen when Joe Biden is already in office, when the Democrats have a slim majority in the Senate, and it's more likely that Donald Trump will be convicted for this article of impeachment. And I think that's actually a better outcome because again, it helps to fulfill the objective of preventing this person from running for president again. So I think it's actually, whether Mitch McConnell meant it to be or not, a good move that would, more likely lead to Trump getting convicted of something that he's clearly guilty of.
Yeah. And I don't know. We were talking, JR and I were talking about Mitch McConnell and that thing about him secretly being pleased and behind the scenes. And I'm sure that, look, Mitch McConnell has never seemed like a person that was like, wearing a red hat at home or anything. Like he's not a true believer in that way. He's a more old school Republican, and that means he's still awful, but he's awful in specific sort of policy-based ways and judicial ways in terms of choosing judges. And so I get that he would want, if possible, to stop Trump from having, even more control over the Republican Party going forward. It's not like if Trump is stopped from pursuing federal office, that's it for Trump. I was never super convinced that he was going to seriously run in 2024 anyway. I think he might run, but there's barely going to be anything left of him by then. He's still going to be out there no matter what. You can ban him from Twitter and ban him from running for office. He's still going to exist. He's still an issue. And so I get that Mitch McConnell would want to throw up a few more barriers there. But I also, on the show this morning, before we found out about the fact that he's definitely punting until he's no longer in charge, he's not necessarily going to stick his neck, all the way out of the shell so his head can be cut off. Like he doesn't necessarily want to be the one who's going to face all the ire. He would prefer that the Democrats do it if the end result is the same. So it's like, okay, good. You don't like Trump that much. It's not a profile in courage or anything like that. And so whatever credit we want to give him, I think it's necessarily, I think, quite limited.
Yeah, I give him no credit. Let's be clear. I give him zero credit. He has aided and abetted Donald Trump throughout his 4 years in office. So I'm just saying that the outcome, as a result of Mitch McConnell refusing to have the current Senate reconvene in order to have this trial, is either intentionally or unintentionally a good move for people who want this impeachment to fulfill the two objectives, to serve as a deterrent and to prevent Donald Trump from running for office again. I think that it serves as more of a deterrent if you have a Senate that convicts him as opposed to a Republican majority Senate that could potentially exonerate him. Remember, in the first impeachment, Donald Trump was impeached in the House and then he was exonerated in the Senate. And that sends all the wrong messages, right? It sends the message of, oh, I mean, I was acquitted. Like I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't found guilty. Like it's that same feel. And I don't want that to happen in this case. Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think that today's news is important, and I am happy to see at least 10 Republican lawmakers vote in the right way. I believe we have a graphic. We should know who they are. Oh, we don't. Okay, so of course, Liz Cheney was one of the Republican lawmakers who was the most vociferous in supporting this impeachment effort, and of course there are 9 others. I don't like the reputation rehab that's happening right now on cable news in response to Liz Cheney. It's like, oh, this is a profile in courage.
No, but I also want to. She's great.
I mean, she's obviously not the best, but not to get too sidetracked by that. I do also want to point out that Republican lawmakers are terrified of Trump's base. That's also a big part of this story, which is why so many of them are unwilling to go on the record to do the right thing, to hold him accountable for his actions. So I'm gonna go ahead and reset now to kind of talk about what the proceedings were like today. We'll play some sound, show you what the ridiculous arguments were from Republican lawmakers, and then get to other details. So the House of Representatives has voted to impeach Donald Trump for the second time, with 10 Republicans voting in favor of impeachment. However, unfortunately, most Republican lawmakers who spoke on the House floor today decided against actually talking about the merit behind the impeachment charge, which is inciting insurrection, and instead focused on how they just didn't feel so great about the process. They felt that it was just a little too rushed. So here's GOP Congressman Tom Cole refusing to address the actual issue and instead focusing on the process. Let's hear what he had to say.
Mr. Speaker, I think my colleagues in the majority need to think about this more soberly. We need to recognize we are following a flawed process. We need to recognize that people of goodwill can differ. We need to recognize that while the House may be done with this matter after today's vote, it will not be done for the country. It will not be done for the Senate, and it will not be done for the incoming Biden administration.
Let me just be clear that when it comes to issues that Republicans are fond of, things that they want to accomplish, they do not hesitate. Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed as a Supreme Court justice. very quickly, and there was very little time left before the general election took place. I point that out because obviously what we're hearing from representatives like Tom Cole is, it's not a sincere argument. It's just an effort to deflect from the very real issue at hand here, which is the president of the United States inciting violence, inciting insurrection, doing so just before the Capitol riots took place. And he just doesn't feel the need to address that, probably because he's among the Republican lawmakers who are terrified of Donald Trump and terrified of his base, which I'll get to in just a minute. But John, thoughts on what Representative Cole said there?
Yeah, it's dumb, stupid nonsense. I mean, that's my answer to almost everything that we have to listen to. It doesn't mean anything. It's not a representation of an honest standard he's applying to this behavior that he would carry forward to evaluations of other presidents' behavior. It's just, it doesn't mean anything and it doesn't represent anything. It just means I would really prefer if you not do this thing to the guy that I still need to profess loyalty for, because his base could come for me if we don't. And also, like, it would be really inconvenient if you were to point out all the lies around the election that he was telling, because like I and almost every other Republican in here were participating in that, whether because we're genuinely crazy like some of us, or because it was just a great way to raise a lot of money. And side question, what happens to the hundreds of millions of dollars that Trump raised to fight the election? Like, that's still out there somewhere. But anyway, and the thing that I wanna make sure that we focus on is, it isn't just what happened on January 6th and what might happen over the next few days. That was obviously bad. It wasn't even just what happened after the election. Trump spent literally months trying to convince his fans that the election is going to be invalid because of mail-in ballots and all of that. After the Republican Party, by the way, not just him, fought to make it as difficult to vote as possible during a pandemic. So he did all of that. And then they spent months after the election trying to convince everyone who would listen that it had been stolen. And he lied to them and lied to them and lied to them. And not just Trump, his lawyers, the media, other politicians, whether because they're true believers or because cynically they really wanted to overthrow this thing. They tried to do that in every way they could. They did it time after time in court case after court case. And then they tried to send the rival slates of electors. Then they tried to get Mike Pence to overthrow it. If any of this had been able to work, they would have seized power. They tried to do that. January 6th was the most violent culmination of that. And even after that had happened, Trump was still saying things like, these are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been very badly and unfairly treated for so long. He tried to nullify an election. And many of them, almost all of them, are implicated in it. This isn't just about the 6th. If that cop hadn't been beaten to death, he would still need to be removed from office as a result of what he did, as a warning to future presidents that you do not get to say that any election is invalid if you don't happen to come out on top in it.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. Now, I do also want to bring up what we're hearing more and more about, and it's that Republican lawmakers are genuinely terrified of Trump supporters. And to be clear, I mean, I think any member of Congress should be afraid of them after what we experienced, what we saw in the Capitol. But that does not excuse their behavior. It doesn't excuse the fact that they've enabled Donald Trump. It doesn't excuse the fact that they continue to be apologists for Donald Trump. And so I go to a statement from Jamie Gangle from CNN. Hopefully I didn't butcher that name, but he says this: I was told that the White House is continuing to pressure Republican Congress members that Trump has not stopped and that members fear for their lives and for their families' lives. And what we saw on January 6th, a week later, that says a lot, that the White House is still pressuring people. And then even Representative Jason Cole shed some light on this during a recent interview. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
A number of things that are happening on the Republican side. A very small handful, I think, are kind of morally bankrupt individuals who have given in to these conspiracy theories and are too far gone to be redeemed. But the majority of them are actually paralyzed with fear. You know, I had a lot of conversations with my Republican colleagues last night, and a couple of them broke down in tears talking to me and saying that they are afraid for their lives if they vote for this impeachment. My response was not to be unsympathetic, but welcome to the club. That's leadership. Our country is in a challenging time. Many of us have felt that way for a long time.
I wonder if those terrified Republican members of Congress had any empathy whatsoever for people like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, people who have been targeted by Donald Trump over and over again. I didn't see any empathy from Republican lawmakers then. I don't know if they have any empathy now, but it is, I love the point that Representative Crow made there, because he's absolutely right. Welcome to the club. This is what people have been dealing with, not just in Congress, but throughout the country as a result of Donald Trump's, violent rhetoric and how he incites the violence that we've experienced in this country throughout the last 4 years. In cases that I outlined recently, the hate march in Charlottesville, the mass shooting that took place in El Paso by an anti-immigrant Trump supporter, Cesar Sayoc sending bombs to members of Congress that he, Democratic members of Congress, of course, and members of the media. Let's not pretend like this is the one isolated incident where Trump incited violence. This is what he has been doing without any consequences, with the Republican Party enabling him, and it has come back to bite them. And they have to take responsibility for it. And more importantly, every member of Congress needs to see their position of power for what it is supposed to be. They are public servants. They are supposed to be leaders. They are supposed to be representing the best interests of their constituents, okay? And so many of them have decided to neglect their duties in order to, pay lip service to this insane, tyrant, like wannabe tyrant. And I think that they should be called out. And John, I know I'm going on and on, but I do want to name the 10 Republican lawmakers who actually decided that despite all the threats, that they were going to vote to impeach Donald Trump today. That includes Representative Jamie Herrera from Washington, Representative Alex Gonzalez of Ohio, Representative John Katko of New York, Representative Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, Representative Peter Major of Michigan, Representative Dan Newhouse of Washington, Representative Tom Rice of South Carolina, Representative Fred Upton of Michigan, and finally, Representative David Velado of California, another name that I probably butchered, I apologize, but I'm giving you credit here, all right? Give me a break.
Take it.
So,
get off her back, man. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. Small fact check, Jamie Galago's a woman, but you got the name right, I think. But anyway, the reporter. So two or more things can be happening at the same time. They can actually be genuinely worried that if they vote to impeach Trump, that tomorrow or in a week or in 6 months, they or their family will be killed. I don't begrudge anyone that fear. This is a pack of millions of crazy people. That's actually what it is. But we can also point out that while it's horrible if Frankenstein's monster is hunting you down, if you and your entire party have spent years making it in some remote mansion and pumping life into it because you were getting something out of it along the way, well, then we can point that out. We can try to protect you afterward. We can applaud you when you finally turn against Frankenstein, maybe. But we can also point out that you helped to build this. Like Fox, they're hurting right now in terms of their ratings. They got beat by CNN and MSNBC for the first time in like 20 years.
Sorry.
Because they drove people to look for ever crazier content. And people have gone for it. And now OAN and Newsmax are way crazier than Fox. So again, you get to be scared of the monster when it comes for you. You don't get to be shocked that it turned on you. That's what monsters do.
Just a quick comment about the more extreme right-wing media outlets like OAN. They have succeeded in convincing some portion of Trump's base to believe that the riots were done by Black Lives Matter. I don't really know, like it really is a testament to the power of propaganda, because how do you watch video from what happened in the Capitol and think, yeah, those people are BLM. They're definite. Like all of those like white guys, like angry white guys in military gear in a lot of cases. Yeah, they're totally BLM, totally. The guy who's wearing a sweater celebrating the Holocaust, yeah, that guy's part of BLM. What? I just, man,
you're a rational person, so you're saying, how can you believe? They don't believe in the way that we believe things. They feel, like, oh, it's convenient. Like, I'm sure you've seen the mashup of Kevin Sorbo, like 4 tweets. And like the first one's like, we gotta fight, take back this election. The second one is like the morning of the attack. It's history will be made today. The third one is like a little bit into the incident. It's like, hey guys, like, don't go crazy. Don't act like Antifa. The fourth one is Antifa attack the Capitol. It's like, no, you don't get to, like, they don't become Antifa when they go too far for you. You don't like that a MAGA person beat a cop to death, okay? And I get that, I don't like it either, but I also didn't advocate for it. So yeah, they don't believe facts based on their attachment to reality. They believe what is convenient to believe, or at the very least, they say that they believe what is convenient to believe.
When we come back from the break, we'll show you the absolutely disgusting reaction from Republican lawmakers to Representative Cori Bush's speech on the House floor today. And later, we'll give you the details on what's being done for enhanced security measures at the Capitol, the lead up to Joe Biden's inauguration. You don't want to miss the details on that. So stick around, we'll see you in just a few minutes. Everybody, welcome to our social break. Just a quick fun programming note. We can all use a little fun. Happy Half Hour is now live streamed on Wednesdays over Twitch. Our Twitch channel is twitch.tv/TYT for those of you who aren't familiar with it yet. And so you can actually tune in after the post game at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, again at twitch.tv/TYT. And the video on demand is available Fridays to members at tyt.com/join. So it's one of the best ways to get archives of all of our programs. I mean, I'm not a paying member of TYT, I just work here, but I love having access to the archives because I watch a lot of our programming, to be honest. Like I watch your show, not every day because I don't have time, but I also watch Old School, like religiously. I love Old School, it's probably my favorite show on the network. I might like Old School more than my own show. But anyway, definitely check that out.
They're kind of different. I like Game of Thrones more than this show, but they're not really competing with each other.
That's true. That's very true. It's a really good point. All right, so let's go to some member comments. Brad Boxwine, ooh, stay away. I have a headache today, and like wine sounds awful. Brad writes in and says, "We got him again. 10 Republicans now. How brave." I hear you. Max's mama says, "While I applaud the 10 Republicans who voted for impeachment, I find it horribly dismaying that a vast majority of Republicans ostensibly think Trump did nothing wrong." Yeah. I mean, at least publicly they say that Trump did nothing wrong. But what's worrying is that many of them know that Trump did something wrong, and they're either too afraid to say anything publicly or do the right thing publicly, or they're just lying to the American people because they just want to be loyalists to Trump. It's gross. Rob writes in and says, "I would imagine that Mitch McConnell and several other Republicans sincerely want to root out Trumpism from the GOP, but my couch side opinion is that he doesn't think that is possible." Honestly, I don't know if that's possible because Trumpism doesn't just go away after you impeach and convict Donald Trump. 71% of Republican voters still approve of Donald Trump. That's an issue.
And
you know,
yeah, QAnon doesn't just go away after Trump either.
Yeah. Although Alex Jones had a meltdown toward QAnon recently, and I enjoyed it. I'm like, I think I agree with him. But then I realized like he doesn't want any group of people to like out lunatic him. So it's like a competition thing. God,
yeah.
So sad.
Yeah.
It's sad. Anyway, we got 30 seconds left. Okay, Greg writes in and says, maybe the senators will feel more free to vote against Trump if the trial happens after he's out of office. Yeah, I think that's part of it. And plus, the Democrats will have a slim majority in the Senate as well, which increases the chances of Trump actually getting convicted. No Twitter, no social media to use for attacks. And I totally agree with you. It's a really great point. So we'll see what happens. For now, though, we got to get back to the show. See you there. Welcome back, everyone. Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola, host of the Damage Report. You should be checking that out every day. It's on the TYT network at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern. John, you are a fan fave in the company, so at some point I'm going to stop promoting you. I'm just kidding.
I'm surprised it lasted this long, but are you not merciful?
You know, I actually really like promoting people that I appreciate. So you're one of them. So everyone check out the Damage Report because I'm being serious. It's a great show. Let's talk a little bit though about something that really stood out during today's impeachment of Donald Trump. Has to do with racial issues in this country that Republicans deny exist, but certainly does exist. So, as members of the House of Representatives were debating and making their case as to why Donald Trump should be impeached, and to be clear, he has been impeached for the second time, with even 10 Republicans joining Democrats in voting to impeach him. Cori Bush stood up and she had an important statement to make, especially when you consider the influx of white supremacy in this country under the Trump administration. What's important here, though, is her message and how Republican lawmakers reacted to it. Let's watch.
The 117th Congress must understand that we have a mandate to legislate in defense of Black lives. The first step in that process is to root out white supremacy, starting with impeaching the white supremacist in chief. Thank you, and I yield back.
And from New York wishes to reserve the gentleman from Ohio.
So you hear Republican lawmakers in the House just booing her for saying something that's demonstrably true. After the riots happened in the Capitol, Donald Trump referred to these people as special. Mm-hmm. You had a person wearing a hoodie that was celebrating the Holocaust. He's luckily been arrested. You have these Trump zealots in tactical gear holding flexi cuffs because they were planning on holding members of Congress hostage. I mean, Trump. His statements have gone past dog whistles, and the fact that these Republican lawmakers are still in denial about this. Well, a lot of them are white supremacists themselves. A lot of them want to protect Confederate statues, even knowing full well that these were soldiers who were treasonous, who were un-American. It's amazing to me, but it's not amazing. It's, I guess, to be expected. But in this moment, to feel emboldened enough to boo her as she's making that statement tells you everything you need to know about the rot in the Republican Party.
Also, like, substance aside, which you dealt with, you're booing? It's like 10 people in there. Why? That's not the environment for booing. You're right there. I can see you. It's not, you boo a screen as part of a crowd. It's like a ritual thing. You're booing your colleague that's right over there. Okay, you disagree with her. I get it. You're gonna vote, not to impeach him because you're okay with what happened. But booing, it just seems so juvenile. But then, we had Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about being censored while literally speaking on national television. So these are not necessarily the smartest people. But anyway, yeah. The only thing that could have been better than her comment there was the immediate demonstration of its validity.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true. I mean, way to prove her point, guys. Way to prove her point. But I am happy to see a strong progressive like Cori Bush in Congress, joining the ranks of all the squad, people who have been fighting for us, and will continue to do so. And so I'm at least there's that silver lining as we talk about this story. Just seeing this strong woman stand up on the House floor and make a strong statement that's true, and her willingness to do it, unafraid of whatever threats or consequences may come from Trump zealots, it gives you a sense of the kind of strength she has, and I genuinely appreciate it. Well, let's move on to what security measures are taking place right now, because understandably people are worried about their lives as they perform their duties as members of Congress. So thousands of National Guard troops have been deployed in the Capitol. In fact, there have been some pretty depressing photos coming from the Capitol building showing not just the number of National Guard troops who are there, but they're literally sleeping there. You see images of them sleeping on the floor, and of course they're there to provide additional security following the insurrectionists who rioted in the Capitol last week. That led to 5 people dying. Members of Congress had to flee and go to secure rooms. They had to shelter in place. Many of them feared for their lives. So it makes all the sense in the world that these extra precautions are taking place. Now, Huffington Post reporter Igor Bobik also tweeted this: there are at least 1,000, probably more, National Guard troops all over the Capitol Visitor Center, Emancipation Hall, and surrounding hallways. They're sleeping in reception areas, the cafeteria, the entrance to the building, everywhere. And he did share these images with his followers. So let's just take a quick look at that. I mean, just, it's, I don't know, I'm bummed out, John. Like it's really depressing. Like what we're seeing in the country right now is just beyond depressing, because we're supposed to be better than this. This shouldn't have to happen, but this is where we're at, and you see these images and it just depressed me. It depressed me that we've devolved so much. But anyway, there's more on what security measures are being implemented to keep people safe. But I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah. I had Jordan Yule on my show, and we had sort of a depressed period of the episode where we're talking about the state of the country, and it's not just like the day to day, I can't believe this is happening. It's the deep gut feeling that it's not going anywhere, that there are some durable changes that have been made to the way tens of millions of people deal with and interface with politics. And those people have been successful in dominating right-wing rhetoric online. They've dominated right-wing media. And now they're electing more and more politicians that see politics the exact same way they do. Through a conspiratorial, fact-free sense, sure, that's not necessarily new, the fact-free part, but through it's just about inflicting pain on the other side, that it's all war all the time, and you always have to fight. It's grounded in seemingly nothing that has to actually do with politics. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Madison Cawthorn. What are the major policy planks that make them distinct? What policies are they there to pursue? I honestly can't tell you. Like I honestly don't know, and I don't think their voters know or care either. And so Like I hope that maybe taking Trump seriously accomplishes something, but the fact that in 4 years we've moved from joking about how small Trump's inauguration crowd is to having an equally sized crowd of soldiers that are needed there to stop tens of thousands of armed conservatives from gunning down Congress. It sort of feels inevitable. We knew that this was a fascist movement. We spent night after night for years warning people about it. But seeing the images, seeing it play out, despite all the work that activists did and some good politicians did, some good people in the media did, it's depressing.
Yeah, it's beyond depressing. And what adds insult to injury is when some of the discourse taking place is critical of people like us who have been warning about this, but more importantly, who are emphasizing the reality of this situation right now. We get called, we're hysterical and we're overreacting. I mean, at what point is it right to these people to take things seriously? Like at what point? Honest, like Charlottesville, oh, people are being hysterical. Mass shooting in El Paso, that was fueled by Donald Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric. Oh, you guys are being hysterical. We're not gonna do anything. Okay, the Tree of Life Synagogue, the white supremacist attack there. Hysterical. People just don't like Donald Trump. No, this is not being hysterical. People are dying. And look, just recently, there's been a lot going on with Armenia, and I'm Armenian, so I've been following that news. And so there's an ongoing war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I'm not gonna go through all the details, it's a complex story, but the point is the Prime Minister of Armenia decided to sign a ceasefire and engage in these negotiations with Azerbaijan that a large portion of Armenians do not agree with. And Armenia is this small, poor country, let's keep it real. And since they didn't like that decision, they stormed government buildings. They broke into government buildings. And watching that, I remember at the time thinking that's so devastating and so terrifying, by the way. And my family immigrated to the United States for a different kind of life. And to see that happening in the United States, and more importantly, to see members of the Capitol Police enable it, to see Republican lawmakers, elected officials in government enable it. It's terrifying, it's disgusting. I wanna feel pride in my country, right? And I think that that's where the depression comes from, to like reflect on where we are and just understand like how do you even start to heal? Like how do you even start to make things right? Because Trumpism doesn't go away. 71% of Republican voters after the riots happened still approve of Donald Trump. That's not going away, guys. And I don't know what the solution is. Joe Biden simply saying like, we're gonna heal and we're gonna work together. That's not enough. Being a friendly, polite president, that's not enough. Anyway, go ahead, John.
Yeah, and it's not. I think I said on the show, it's like the philosophy of looking forward, not looking back, falls apart as soon as someone's actually behind you with a knife. Like it's not like, oh, we just hold them off until Joe Biden's inaugurated, and then they go away, go away their Gadsden flags, and they're back to democracy. Like, and these are people who have been convinced, and some of them are elected officials. They think universal mail-in ballots are diabolical. Storming the Capitol is patriotic. Like, think about how much work it takes to convince millions of people to hold those thoughts simultaneously in their brains.
Well, okay, so let's focus on other security measures, including the fact that House Democrats wanted to make sure that anyone who enters the House floor has gone through a metal detector for obvious reasons. There have been some indications, and it's an ongoing investigation, indicating that Republican members of Congress were involved in organizing what took place. You also had QAnon supporting Congress people, newly elected Congress people, live tweeting the whereabouts of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi as they're trying to get to secure locations to avoid this riotous mob that was coming after them. And so it's reasonable for House Democrats to want additional safety measures in order to go to work, do the jobs that they're supposed to do, and not fear for their lives. And so the metal detectors were installed Tuesday to screen everyone, including lawmakers, before entering the House floor. And there was a lot of crying about it. A lot of crying coming from Republican lawmakers who, by the way, think that it makes sense to have children go through metal detectors every time they go to school because they refuse to do anything about gun violence in this country. But here's one representative, Republican lawmaker, Lesko, who says this: for members of Congress to enter the House floor of the US House, we now have to go through intense security measures on top of the security we already go through. These new provisions include searches and being wanded like criminals. Oh, but do you have any problem with children being wanded like criminals when they're just trying to go to school? Because that's been going on in this country. We now live in Pelosi's communist America, again, providing more evidence for how incredibly stupid, ignorant, and uninformed our own lawmakers are. To compare that to communism is just pathetic. And then one video, this is Representative Stube making a similar argument on the House floor today.
I would be remiss if I didn't address the atrocities occurring right here on the House floor today. A week ago, this building was attacked, and instead of working with Republicans to attempt to prevent that from ever happening again, the Speaker and her Democratic colleagues think an appropriate response is to prevent members from exercising their Second Amendment constitutional rights in the very place that wasn't secure a week ago. This attack didn't come from the inside, it came from the outside. And to respond by restricting members' Second Amendment rights in the very institution that is supposed to uphold those rights is appalling.
The lead organizer for the Stop the Steal rally has implicated 3 Republican members of Congress for organizing what took place in the Capitol. So again, it's an ongoing investigation. And I mean, we can see from their public posts that they were very much like hinting at what was gonna go down that day. But nonetheless, yeah, you guys are a threat to the country. You're a threat to people's safety. The fact that he's like, Nancy Pelosi didn't consult with the Republican lawmakers who have been enabling Donald Trump's violent rhetoric for the last 4 years. It's so weird. Why didn't she do that? Because you're not to be trusted. As he stands there and enables Donald Trump, serves as an apologist for Donald Trump, he's somehow shocked that House Democrats do not trust him to help plan a way to keep people safe. Yeah, like stop being so delusional about who you are. Like just take a moment of self-reflection. But that's asking too much from congressional lawmakers, Republicans specifically. Go ahead, John.
That's true. And look, really fast, it's convenient to distract people. Like, oh, he is appalled about the metal detectors. Like not the context of what's been going on the past few months, just that specifically. Yeah, and you correctly pointed out, it remains to be seen to what extent the attack was coming from inside of the building or could in the future. Like anyone watching this, do you want to be alone on an elevator with Marjorie Taylor Greene? Like when she could potentially be holding a weapon, does anyone want that? And not being willing to go through, you showed a congresswoman, I think it was Debbie Lesko. I saw a mashup. So it was a tweet you showed of her complaining about how could they possibly ask this? And like 3 hours earlier, it was, thank you to the Capitol Police who kept us safe. Okay, they're trying to keep them safe. The police want the metal detectors. So it's convenient, okay, to praise them as heroes, but not to actually potentially protect them from being shot. Because remember, a cop was just killed. You seem to have moved on from that. You seem to have forgotten that very fast. I don't think the cops who are still working in the building have forgotten yet. And they're pushing their way through. I forget if it was Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert, I get them mixed up, wouldn't let them look in their bag. I think it was David Hogg pointed out, okay, why don't they have clear backpacks anyway? That's what we've done around the country. Instead of limiting guns, we set up the metal detectors and we make them wear clear bags. If you think it's okay for so many people in areas you'll never visit, why aren't you willing to do that yourself? The whole thing is just such nonsense. They don't actually, it's not about respecting law enforcement. If you're knocking over a cop to get through a metal detector without actually complying with their wishes, you don't get to claim that you back the blue.
When we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit about some shady and strange things that have come up, decisions that were made prior to the riot taking place. We'll give you those details and more when we return. Stick around. Hey everyone, welcome back. This is our social break. I'm gonna read some super chats, and Henry Messenger actually makes a good point. McConnell plans on using impeachment to prevent confirmation hearings of Biden's cabinet. Well, if that happens, Biden absolutely needs to appoint acting cabinet members, much like Donald Trump did when he wanted to avoid confirmation hearings for his nominees. So I think, Mitch McConnell is not to be trusted, so I think you really do bring up a great point. But there are options available to President-elect Joe Biden. Kyle Cushing says, in regard to impeachment, do you think Mitch is happy with the impeachment because it will obstruct Biden's agenda and appointments? I don't trust Mitch to do the right thing. As I mentioned earlier, I agree with you. I think that's definitely a possibility. Ryan L says, I had a thought and wanted your perspective. Trump has nestled into the emotion part of his voters' brains. In debate, would it be better to deliberately avoid his name and just stick to policy? Yeah, I don't know. I think that's the best way I can honestly answer that question. I don't know what the right solution is. But I agree with Donald Trump getting banned from Twitter. I also agree that censorship is something that we should be concerned about, right? But if Republicans and, quite honestly, leftists are genuinely concerned about how banning Trump is a threat to the left or a threat to the freedom of speech, the big problem here is, these companies have gotten too big and too powerful. So you should be supporting antitrust laws. You should be supporting the antitrust lawsuit and investigation that's taking place right now. That's one of the best ways to ensure that no one platform or a few platforms have too much power, right? But in regard to Donald Trump getting banned, that was the right decision. I want to be clear about that. And I think that does really hurt his ability to spread propaganda, because he doesn't want to be he's lazy. He doesn't want to be making videos. He doesn't want to address people through the other avenues in talking to the American people. He just wants to put out a tweet as hateful and divisive as it might be. And that's how he's played this game the entire time. Zoltan Hall says, isolated incident. Have they forgotten the stand back and stand by comments he made to Proud Boys during the debates? Yeah, great point. That's another, just one more incident to add to the long list of Donald Trump inciting violence. Andrew Borth says that Tim McVeigh was reprimanded for wearing a white power shirt while in the army. So January 6th was inevitable. Can we have a real talk now? Very few rioters appear to be under 40, maybe a good sign. Yeah, I'm terrified about the future of this country. But we do have to get back to the show. So let's do that and talk about whether there were some conspiracies behind the scenes as this riot took place. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Make sure you stick around for the second hour of the program today, where we will switch things up and talk about other issues outside of the Capitol Hill riots that took place. But for now, let's talk about possible conspiracy leading up to the Capitol Hill riot. So Representative Ayanna Pressley, specifically her chief of staff, has raised some concerns about what they experienced as the riots were taking place in the Capitol. Sarah Grow, who is her chief of staff, says that every panic button in my office had been torn out, the whole unit. That is, incredibly suspicious. So the buttons had actually been there, and Ayanna Pressley had not changed offices. So there's no other real explanation of what happened. She went on to say that the panic buttons were installed because Ms. Pressley, a member of the progressive group of the House Democrats, dubbed the Squad, had been on the receiving end of racist attacks by Donald Trump and his supporters. Remember, there was a period of time where Trump was just laser focused on pointing out, members of the Squad and using the same type of rhetoric that we've seen in encouraging his supporters to go after them, attack them. 2 US Capitol police officers, by the way, have since been suspended, and at least 10 more are under investigation for playing potential roles in the riot. And John, just before we went on air, you mentioned an update to those numbers, which is terrifying.
Yeah, so this is at least according to the appeal. The most recent number I've seen is 28 currently serving police from around the country have so far been identified. And remember, we're still in the initial days of this thing. People are combing through all the live streamed video, going through the Parler posts and things like that. But 28. But I don't know why. Like, it's good that we have a number. I don't know. I hope nobody watching this is like surprised. Like, really, cops would do this? Yeah, I feel like if you were to like rank by job, that would probably be one of the highest numbers that what I would have expected.
So there were other questionable things that were noticed by Democratic lawmakers. I want to now turn to Representative Cheryl, who just noticed that a day before the riots took place, there were certain tours happening in the Capitol building. Let's watch what she has to say.
We can't have a democracy if members of Congress are actively helping the president overturn the election results. And so not only do I intend to see that the president is removed and never runs for office again and doesn't have access to classified material, I also intend to see that those members of Congress who abetted him, those members of Congress who had groups coming through the Capitol that I saw on January 5th, a reconnaissance for the next day, those members of Congress that incited this violent crowd, those members of Congress that attempted to help our president undermine our democracy. I'm going to see that they're held accountable, and if necessary, ensure that they don't serve in Congress.
So John, she mentions Republican lawmakers taking people on, reconnaissance tours of the Capitol building a day before, the riots happened, and she didn't provide any additional detail into that. But I wanted to get your thoughts, especially because you've seen a lot of like Alex Jones type people invited to the Capitol, to the White House by Republicans, by Donald Trump. And I've always wondered about whether that would serve as a security risk in the future.
Yeah. Well, I can say them being invited to the conventions didn't work out great. But anyway, back in 2016. Anyway, with the panic buttons and with the tours, I mean, hopefully we will see, like, there's a lot of little things like this, and I'm sure some of them will end up not being what it seems like. Sure. The fact that the panic buttons were torn out, and I would assume generally, I don't have a lot of experience with panic buttons, I would assume they're hidden, seems especially significant. The tours, they said that the tours hadn't been going on, because it's a pandemic, so that seems incredibly suspicious. I'm assuming investigations are ongoing. But I will just say that while we don't know for sure, we can't say for sure that a member was involved in either of this, or that Capitol Police were involved potentially, or maintenance was involved potentially in removing the panic buttons of what has to be one of the members at the top of whatever list these insane people would put together. If anyone who is sort of new to engaging day to day with what America is like these days thinks that someone being elected into office wouldn't do something like that, they need to look at the history of some of these individuals. Look at the things that Marjorie Taylor Greene has said and done. And they present themselves in a way we're used to people like Ted Cruz, who like tries to create this image of nothing. People seem like true believers to me. The idea that they wouldn't help from the inside, I don't think that we should jump to that conclusion.
Well, to that point, it's been reported in multiple outlets, including The Intercept and The Washington Post, that the lead organizer for the so-called Stop the Steal rally was working alongside Republican members of Congress. Again, this is something that we can't confirm. The investigation is ongoing, but here's what we know. Here's what the allegation is. Ali Alexander, who organized the Stop the Steal movement, said he hatched the plan coinciding with Congress's vote to certify the Electoral College votes, alongside 3 GOP lawmakers, Representatives Andy Biggs of Arizona, Mo Brooks of Alabama, and Paul Gosar of Arizona, all hardline Trump supporters. And his statement was, "We schemed up of putting maximum pressure on Congress while they were voting," Alexander said in a since deleted tweet, or Periscope, I should say. And then he also said that the plan was to change the hearts and the minds of Republicans who were in that body, hearing our loud roar from outside. So that was his Periscope, which again has been deleted for obvious reasons. But look, I'm glad that there's an investigation taking place. If there is, first of all, anyone who enabled Donald Trump and his lies about widespread election fraud, gone. Anyone who decided to challenge the Electoral College votes for their own political careers, they should be gone. They should be removed from office. 14th Amendment. But there should be criminal charges for any member of Congress who has been proven to have engaged in organizing what happened in that insurrectionist riot, and Democrats can't back down from that.
Yeah, and look, one way that hypothetically we could come to this is they've begun to track down people. At some point, they're going to, track down people who were involved in the organization. Some of the people who are in the building, and they're going to try to get them to flip. I saw that one of the alt-right online people who was live broadcasting from inside of it, that Baked Alaska person, apparently right now isn't facing any charges, which could mean that our justice system is failing as always, or it could mean hypothetically that he's cooperating with law enforcement. And if the coordination did happen, and if it was electronic, there are going to be some people in there who in theory could provide that evidence to investigators. Who knows? We'll see. But it's possible. The fact that every file on Parler or whatever had been downloaded, that potentially is another way that some of this could be identified. It's going to be complicated. Right. There's a lot of people. It was organized over a good period of time. We don't know how long the investigation will take, but remember that the crazy people who've joined our Congress don't seem like the smartest individuals either. So I think it raises a greater chance that they could have slipped up and made some of this trackable.
All right, well, that does it for our first hour. We got to take a break, but when we come back, we'll switch gears and talk a little bit about what's going on with the Supreme Court. They're making decisions, guys, and people should know about it. And later in the show, we'll also talk about how HHS is doing some pretty awful things on their way out of the Trump administration. So stick around, we got that and more when we return.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, right, believing that it was actual berries. Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you gotta force people into their humanity.
Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Iadarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There's only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I've seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he's the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're going to win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com.
We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Welcome everyone. You're watching TYT with Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola. So Donald Trump has released a video statement regarding violence in the country. We're going to get to that in just a second. No, let's get to that right now, actually. So let's do it. Let's put up some B-roll. Let me present it. Let's talk about what's going on. So on the same day that Donald Trump was impeached for the second time, this time for inciting an insurrection, he's decided to release a statement via video that addresses the violence in this country, the violence that he himself has incited. And before we go to his video, I want to remind you all that if you look at recent images of the Capitol building, you'll see thousands of National Guard troops laying on the floor. Many of them had to sleep on the floor last night in order to keep the Capitol safe. And one of our members, Texton, wrote in and said this: I've slept on hangar floors, warehouse floors, under trucks, in mud, sand, ice, all over the world when I was in the Marine Corps. I can't imagine how surreal it would be to wake up and open your eyes to the ceiling of the Capitol. Those soldiers will never forget this day. With that said, let's hear what Donald Trump has to say about the very violence in the country that he himself has incited.
I want to be very clear. I unequivocally condemn the violence that we saw last week. Violence and vandalism have absolutely no place in our country and no place in our movement. Making America great again has always been about defending the rule of law, supporting the men and women of law enforcement, and upholding our nation's most sacred traditions and values. Mob violence goes against everything I believe in and everything our movement stands for. No true supporter of mine could ever endorse political violence. No true supporter of mine could ever disrespect law enforcement or our great American flag. No true supporter of mine could ever threaten or harass their fellow Americans. If you do any of these things, you are not supporting our movement, you are attacking it, and you are attacking our country. We cannot tolerate it.
So while I think it's important for him to condemn the violence unequivocally, I do want to just point out that making America great again was never about the rule of law. It was always about white supremacy. Donald Trump has engaged in criminality while serving this country, serving is a weird way of putting it, but while sitting in the White House as the commander in chief. So it's just absolutely ludicrous for him to say something like that. And to say that, MAGA is all about supporting law enforcement. Just not the law enforcement that died on the day that the Capitol riot happened by these insurrectionists. Not supportive of the police officers we saw in videos where they're being suffocated nearly to death by these rioters who are pushing them up against a corner. I mean, it's just, anyway. But again, I guess I would prefer to not hear from Trump at all. I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. But if we have to hear from him, if he feels the need to release any kind of statement, in the very least, he needs to condemn violence. I don't know how effective it's gonna be with these MAGA chuds, but I wanted to get your thoughts, John.
To the chuds, but no, to that, yeah, his description of the movement is obviously incredibly false, but whatever. The statement itself was perfectly fine and would be great if he had delivered it, let's say June 2015. Like if 2 weeks into his movement, when some of the initial crazies were like, yeah, I agree, Mexicans are rapists. Maybe then, if he had begun to push back and had done that consistently, it would really matter. As far as what he can do now, that's fine, that's good. How effective it's gonna be, I doubt very much. Because remember, like we were talking about earlier, they don't really believe things, they just believe whatever is convenient. And when he put out his video, close to a week ago, it very quickly started to spread that it wasn't really him, it was a deep fake. It was a faked thing by the deep state to try to turn off his movement. I'm sure many people will respond the same way to this. Or they'll, get that there's sort of a wink wink. Even though I didn't see it in that, they will believe, well, of course he has to say that. He's trying not to get impeached. Anyway, the interpretation is no longer directly on him. He's baked it in over the last couple of years. My question for you would be, is he saying this to not be convicted? Is he saying this to be able to get back onto Twitter? I honestly think that it's more likely to be the latter than the former out of those two.
Yeah, look, Donald Trump has absolutely no interest in doing the right thing just to do the right thing. Like every time he's done something that appears to be the right thing, it's motivated by his own self-interest. So, you bring up the social media angle. He has been banned from pretty much every major social media platform. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube was the latest. And so he hates it. And he did mention that in his speech. I actually wasn't planning on going to that video during this conversation, but I'll give you guys some time to get to that video video next so we can hear what he has to say. But I want to also be clear about something. Donald Trump deserved to be banned from these platforms. I am not someone who's in favor of censorship, but he has used these platforms, particularly Twitter, in order to incite the violence that we've seen in this country over the last 4 years. He should have condemned the violence after Charlottesville. He should have condemned the violence after the Cesar Sayoc story broke. He should have condemned the violence. Instead, he equivocates. He serves as an apologist for the violence. He even says complimentary things. Some of them are fine people. Come on, guys. We all know the truth about it. But here he is whining and crying about social media because that's all he seems to care about.
Yeah.
I also want to say a few words about the unprecedented assault on free speech we have seen in recent days. These are tense and difficult times. The efforts to censor, cancel, and blacklist our fellow citizens are wrong, and they are dangerous. What is needed now is for us to listen to one another, not to silence one another. All of us can choose by our actions to rise above the rancor and find common ground and shared purpose.
There are days like today where I have a lot of difficulty not cursing on this show. He can F off, 100% F. You, who's a member of our federal government, Donald Trump, tried to censor members of Congress from simply certifying the Electoral College votes or simply sharing what their true opinions are about his, his rhetoric in office, his behavior in office. He threatens people. One of the stories today was how he, the lead up to the Capitol riots, he had talked to Mike Pence, who was intent on certifying the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden, and he was like, you can either be remembered as a patriot or, a P word.
Can you say that? I don't think you can say that actually.
I can't. No, I can't. Unfortunately,
you don't want to.
But
you
guys
want to
get
rise above the rancor, Anna. Don't say that. Yeah, it's just such not. I take back everything I said about the first video. Screw him. God, that's so terrible. I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick. Like can we have one conversation about free speech or the First Amendment? I tweeted something to this effect that isn't just about, hey, let's not have consequences for really rich, powerful men who've done something bad. Like, is that the only concern when it comes to speech, when it comes to expression and rights? It really does. Like, and every one of the, like every topic has people who make that their mission. That's what they're focused on. It seems like the only people, other than like I guess the ACLU, who are really about free speech. It's just, no, keep letting me monetize, please. Just keep letting me monetize. Like I know I did really bad things, and I totally violated the terms of service over and over and over, and they were public, and I knew what I was doing. But please just let me keep making money off of this. That is not the entirety of what the First Amendment and speech is about. Rich people like Trump and other members, other people almost exclusively in the media, entertainment, and politics who run afoul of one platform or another and find it inconvenient they make slightly less money temporarily. It's a concern, sure, but that's not the entirety of the free speech conversation. And I hate that we keep making it that.
Yeah, and for the left, because I have seen a lot of this on Twitter, and I think it's depressing to see it because it seems like some of them are more concerned about what Twitter did to Trump's Twitter account as opposed to what the real threat was last week, which was thousands of insurrectionists storming the Capitol building and having 5 people die as a result of that. That's a little bit of an issue. How about focus on that just a little bit. But if you are on the left and you're concerned about censorship, I hear you. It is a legitimate concern because we've seen it happen to people on the left, people who don't have the kind of power and wealth and influence that someone like Donald Trump has. But your argument should be focused heavily on antitrust regulations in order to ensure that these companies don't become too powerful, to ensure that there's a diversity of options when you want to engage in this type of speech on social media platforms. That should be the focus. But when you see them minimize what happened in the Capitol yesterday while simultaneously make a giant deal about poor victim Donald Trump, that's a problem. I don't want to associate with that kind of argument. It's stupid. And it does not help the movement. It just doesn't. It doesn't. Focus on the antitrust laws. Focus on those regulations. Focus on what your proposed solutions are gonna be. And please, for the love of God, stop minimizing what happened last week. It's not a joke. Okay, you guys know where I stand on that issue. Let's take a break. We'll be back. Welcome to our social break. Let's show our Twitch audience a little love. Holly Beer Dragon gifted 5 subs. Thank you. Tell me what to put gifted 5 subs. Obi Mom Kenobi gifted 2 subs, and I hear that she's feeling a little under the weather. So everyone in our live show community, please send her some love and please get better soon. DJ 80 gifted 5 subs. Zookeeper Tenor gifted a sub. Crown Judah gifted 5 subs. Senna Sherry gifted 10 subs. Melissa Stoner 3 months prime with the statement, yay, couple days late, but I'm glad I can resub. Thank you so much for supporting us. Surf King 3 months prime. Inked Betty Gaming 3 months prime. AJ Nestor 7 months tier 1. Draco Kid 2 months prime. Yay, Jeff Bezos money to TYT. I do really love finding ways to make money off of Jeff Bezos, because why not? And Casa de Progressive 5 months prime. One Crew 8 months tier 1 with this comment. I honestly don't know how I would deal with the unprecedented ridiculousness of everything going on without TYT. It's awesome to have good people fighting for actual people and not corporate sponsors. Love being part of the TYT community. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I hear that it's actually very bad. It's very naughty to be funded by your audience, but I would prefer that over any other form of funding. Trimu Batiki. No, I know, I'm not gonna get into it. Trimu Batiki gave 1,000 bits. Damit Kebab gave 2,000 bits. And Sarah Grace SC has a comment for the Republican lawmakers booing Cori Bush on the House floor today. How do we have such unprofessional people in Congress? Really, truly, it's insane. It's Congress, not Maury. A good Maury reference there. Good Maury reference.
Been a bit.
I used to love being when I would get sick and I didn't have to go to school. I used to love watching Maury. Like that daytime TV, just like total trash. Should not have been watching it as a kid.
Not me.
Really?
I watched tons of trash, but I was never like, who's the guy who they cheers name?
Jerry. Jerry.
I listened to his Air America show, but I never really watched his show. It was okay. He was more moderate.
You're such a classy guy, John. Just a good person all around. Anyway, let's get back to our show. We have some non-insurrectionist news to get to that I can't wait to share with you guys. So see you there. Welcome back to TYT. Anna and John with you. Let's get right to our next story, which does not have to do with the insurrectionists, but does have to do with the Supreme Court. In their first abortion-related case since Amy Coney Barrett joined the Supreme Court, Supreme Court justices reinstated a requirement that women seeking abortion through the abortion pill must do so in person. Now, this is something that was essentially a long-standing rule until the pandemic hit. And so clearly, if you're dealing with a pandemic, you want to encourage people to stay home. If you can get their medication delivered to them, or if you can get something like the abortion pill delivered to them, that's probably a safer way to go about things. And the justices decided, no, we're gonna make sure that women go get that pill if they want an abortion in person. The justices granted a request by the Trump administration to lift a federal judge's July order that had suspended the FDA's rule requiring in-person visits to obtain a drug used for medication-induced abortions. So, I mean, I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked that they made this decision. Yeah, John, I wanted to hear your thoughts. I'll give you more details on how this came about.
Yeah, it seems needlessly petty, just inconveniencing people for exercising the rights that they've had for longer than they've been alive. Arguably we'll see going forward. I think the scariest thing about it is probably the potential insight it gives us to the effect on these sorts of laws going forward. It's those first indications that all of what we've been saying in advance of the nomination fight over Amy Coney Barrett, that like, this is really bad. This is a durable, massive shift to the Supreme Court that could potentially have, decades-long implications. It's like we're starting to see that, and it's also a reminder, by the way, for a lot of people that while, luckily the Senate flipped and Joe Biden won, Trump doesn't matter if he gets convicted. He can get thrown out of the country, get banished to some island somewhere. He keeps all of his Supreme Court justices, and there's every reason to believe that there might not be one opening in the next 4 years. Maybe there'll be one. Maybe it'll be Breyer or something. But and so that's durable. What I would hope is that it seems like there's some areas where Biden might be able to, in terms of regulations, to himself change this. I think we'll have to see there. I'm not the expert. We need to bring on Adrian Lawrence in that respect. But this seems like one of the areas where, in theory, Biden could relatively easily and independent of the legislature possibly change that.
Right, yeah. I mean, I'm curious if this is an issue that would be taken up by Biden and congressional Democrats. But as much as I disagree with this decision, it's always been the case leading up to the pandemic, of course, that women had to go get this pill in person. It's just that it had changed because of the pandemic in order to keep people safe. So the ability to access that pill isn't going to change. It's just going to be a little bit harder and riskier during a pandemic to go do so in person. But I don't want anyone to get the impression that the pill has been outlawed. That's not the case. But it should be as easy as possible for people to get either the medication they need, or in this case, the abortion pill, something that's constitutionally protected based on the Supreme Court's ruling in 1973. Get it as easily as possible without having to risk their lives in the middle of a pandemic. But I don't know, John. I mean, maybe the pandemic has gotten a lot better and we don't have 4,000 people dying every single day as a result. I mean, maybe that's what's going on. Maybe that factored into their decision.
Yeah, well, soon we might not, because we hit over 4,600 yesterday. So we might be passing 5,000 soon. So that's exciting. But so like, I don't know in your research for this if you came across the pandemic induced experiment on not requiring it. Did that wreak havoc in some way and we have to go back to the old way? Has there been a demonstration that requirement needs to be reinstated, other than just with the goal of inconveniencing women and making it as difficult as possible for them to exercise this control of their body? I'm doubting it.
I mean, we know.
I doubt it.
Yeah, we know the answer. We know the answer. I mean, when you look at the like the regulations that have been enacted in red states pertaining to abortion. I mean, things like the ultrasound laws, the 24-hour waiting period laws, the ridiculous restrictions and standards that they have for abortion clinics, like the hallway needs to be this wide, like things that don't even make sense. The reason why they do it is to create undue burdens. That's exactly what they're doing. Like, how can we make it more difficult for women to have agency over their own bodies and make decisions about their own bodies? And so this is just one of the ways to make it inconvenient for them. That's the reason why it has been reinstated by the Supreme Court. And I don't know if it's gonna be challenged by Democrats. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the country with just economic devastation, obviously a health crisis that hasn't been dealt with properly. But this just goes to show you that on, of course, corporate related issues, but also cultural issues as well, social issues as well. Having an overwhelming majority of conservatives in the Supreme Court is not going to bode well for many of the issues that we care about. And so all I can do is really think back to some of the insanely dumb arguments that were made against voting for Hillary Clinton back in 2016, because who cares about the Supreme Court? It's no big deal. I mean, the filibusters will happen, and then no. 3 conservative Supreme Court justices confirmed under Trump's administration, and that will have lasting consequences for this country, particularly for progressives and what they want to accomplish through policy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about HHS, because they're doing bad things too on their way out. So the Trump administration has officially nixed regulations barring federal grantees in the Department of Health and Human Services from discriminating against LGBTQ people. And this will have an impact on pretty much every facet of life. So let me explain. According to the 77-page release published in the Federal Register, Obama-era requirements that agencies refrain from discrimination on the basis of sex, religion, sexual orientation, and gender identity, and recognize same-sex marriages as legally valid, violate the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So this is more of the nonsense that we heard from right-wingers in the country in regard to private businesses, whether they should be able to deny baking a cake for a gay couple. Now what the Trump administration is doing is expanding this to also apply to government agencies, as well as publicly funded organizations like adoption agencies and things like that. So HHS grant regulations now state that given the careful balancing of rights, obligations, and goals in the public-private partnerships in federal grant programs, the department believes it appropriate to impose only those non-discrimination requirements required by the Constitution and federal statutes. What they're essentially saying there is that private companies should be able to do what they want. That was what was debated previously. But now what they're saying is that any private company that has received grants or funding from the federal government must abide by the Religious Freedom Restoration Act by not retaliating against any employee who might refuse to provide services to members of the LGBTQ community. So critics claim the new guidance could have wide-ranging implications for agencies that address adoption and foster parenting, as well as homelessness, HIV prevention, elder care, and other public services. There are so many children in this country who need to be adopted, who need foster homes, and to discriminate against members of the LGBTQ community to essentially prevent them from being able to adopt or foster children is just so despicable and goes to the point that I make all the time when it comes to the right wingers claiming that they believe in protecting life. They don't care about lives. They don't care about lives. You should want to have a large population of people, as many people as possible who of course are safe, who have been vetted, approved to adopt children, but they don't care. They don't care about the children. All they care about is hiding behind their religion to continue to discriminate against people whose lifestyles they disagree with.
Yeah. It's an oversimplified term. Giving them the most benefit of the doubt. They want as many people as possible to have lives of whatever quality they end up with. But with the death rate of people giving birth, they obviously don't even care about that. But for this one, obviously we're against the substance of this. I hope that anyone watching this would know that without us going into detail on it. But and this mostly applies to the next graphic that you're gonna get to. What I'm wondering about for this is sort of similar to the last conversation we had, which is, to what extent is this a thing that is just being thrown up as either a signal to the base, something that is intended to clog the works of the first couple of months of the Biden administration? I mean, many of these regulations seemingly could be reversed, and based on the timeline that you're about to get to, I would question whether this might be able to be reversed before it ever goes into effect. I don't know what the experts say, but it seems like this is a sort of thing that is needlessly offensive and cruel, but doesn't necessarily have any reason why it needs to actually go into effect.
Yeah, you make a good point, because it wouldn't go into effect until February 11th. So that would be after Joe Biden has been inaugurated. And the rule change is targeted at child welfare organizations. The final rule could also allow a homeless shelter to turn away a queer teen. Yeah, that'll show them. And a senior center to refuse to drive an elderly gay man to his doctors. These people are disgusting, just absolute. Like, yeah, let's go ahead and enact regulations that specifically punch down, go after the powerless in this country, persecute them, make sure that their lives are absolutely miserable. I mean, these are just the worst kind of people. But to your point, John, yes, I think that Joe Biden's administration can do something about this to ensure that it doesn't, actually take effect and make people's lives more difficult than they need to be. But remember, Biden's got his work cut out for him, because it's just this long list of just reversing the damage that Donald Trump has done through executive orders, through what we're talking about right now with HHS. Never mind the health crisis that we're experiencing with coronavirus, the economic turmoil that so many Americans are experiencing right now. It's just a long list of things that Biden has to both reverse and provide real solutions to. And then outside of this, there's the other big area of policy, and that's foreign policy. Mike Pompeo has wasted no time in making it increasingly difficult for Biden to reverse the damage done by the Trump administration. He has further destroyed any diplomatic potential with Iran, maybe rejoining the Iran nuclear deal. That's something that people have been discussing. The Houthi rebels in Yemen, who have been persecuted by both the United States and the Saudi-led Yemeni government. They've been called terrorists or officially labeled terrorists by the US government under the Trump administration. There's just all sorts of horrific stuff happening that is taking place intentionally to make Joe Biden's job a lot more difficult in reversing Trump's damage. So,
yeah. But yeah, so I don't know. There's obviously there's huge things we'd like for them to do legislatively, and we're gonna try to pressure them to do that. And in theory, they can, because they control the House and they control the Senate. But the Senate Republicans aren't going anywhere, and Mitch McConnell, I don't feel like in his even older age is going to be more down to work with the Democrats than he was under Obama. But at the very least, what we can expect and hope for is we will get judges, because some of the ways they've been nominated have been changed since the Obama years, and we now have control of the Senate, so that can actually happen. And like this story, for instance, like the entire story that you just talked about, how many stories just like this have we talked about in the last 4 years? Some random regulatory attack against the LGBTQ community, specifically against the trans community, things like that, environmental deregulation, so many things like that. At the very least, there's no excuse for him to not both reverse as much of that as is possible, including the nearly 200 different environmental deregulatory efforts that Trump is engaged in, and all of these other areas as well. That is something that in theory could be a constant source of small bits of good news that aren't necessarily going to be the high profile piece of legislation that we immediately want, but they are going to make a significant impact on people's lives, all sorts of different people across the country. And so that is at the very least something that we should be able to count on.
I love it. Let's end on that positive note and take a break. When we come back, story that I wanted to share with you guys yesterday, but we ran out of time. Just more lies from Pompeo regarding Iran. I'll outline that story for you guys, and then some positive news, positive updates when it comes to the Flint water crisis. Stick around. We'll be right back. Mickey C from our member section writes in and says, in regard to Donald Trump's video statement today, so easy to tell when someone else wrote his speech, monotone, no emotion, he hates what he's saying. Yeah, and he does this thing where he's kind of still, and then he gets antsy, so he'll do this. Have you guys noticed that? He just randomly tilts his head. He does that all the time in speeches that he is forced to read from a prompter.
I think he's been more angry to read stuff than this, but I think it's mainly because I think they sold it to him as this is your best chance to get back on Twitter. And if that doesn't happen in the next 2 days, he's gonna flip out. I love when he'll say something responsible or presidency and then turn against it and attack it a day later because it wasn't him to begin with. Yeah, I expect that to come because I don't think they're putting him back on Twitter.
Yeah, and they shouldn't. Look, I don't think that these platforms want to be held liable for facilitating Trump's incitements. You get what I'm saying? Anyway, let's go to Ronnie 1 from our member section who says if they're scared and they can't do their jobs regarding Republican lawmakers, then they should resign. Totally agree. I would not allow them to play victim like they always do. You don't get to start the fire, then complain about how you got burned, and then expect me to feel sorry. Ronnie, yes, I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that big Rick energy. Reference to Rick Strum's stream yesterday. Opinionated writes in and says, fire Kaepernick for taking a knee. And then censoring free speech is intolerable, both from the orange buffoon. Yeah, exactly. I know, but he doesn't need to be consistent, as you guys know. He's gotten away with being inconsistent and being a hypocrite over and over again among his base. And then in our super chat section, we have Terry who wrote in and says, we need to forget about the term Trumpism. This is just a continuation of the Tea Party, only with more white supremacy mixed in. Brentacorn says, so he's not a true supporter of himself. That's in response to Trump's video statement. Sundragon says, Mari reads, the House votes are in. President Trump, you are impeached. Yep. Dark Harlequin says, why are we not making a bigger deal about the bombs found in DC? Am I missing something? Right? I mean, I've brought up the bombs a lot. I just stop talking to me about how I'm being hysterical, okay? I can't stand that because I'm not being hysterical. I'm treating this situation as it is. Anyway, gotta get back to the show. Let's do it. Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. Let's talk a little bit about foreign policy and how the Trump administration is going to make it a lot more difficult for Joe Biden to enter diplomatic talks with Iran. So, with less than a week left in Trump's disastrous presidency, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who still exists, is relentlessly trying to destroy any relationship, any diplomacy that the United States might have in the future with Iran. In fact, the latest lie that he told during his speech had to do with Iran's alleged friendly ties with Al-Qaeda. Let's keep in mind that they've been longtime foes. More details on that later. But first, here are Mike Pompeo's lies.
Al-Qaeda has a new home base. It is the Islamic Republic of Iran. As a result, bin Laden's wicked creation is poised to gain strength and capabilities. We ignore this Iran-Al-Qaeda nexus at our own peril. We need to acknowledge it, we must confront it, indeed we must defeat it. Iran decided to allow Al-Qaeda to establish a new operational headquarters on the condition that Al-Qaeda operatives abide by the regime's rules governing Al-Qaeda stay inside of the country, agency and control. Since 2015, Iran has also given Al-Qaeda leaders greater freedom of movement inside of Iran under their supervision. The Iranian Ministry of Intelligence and Security and the IRGC have provided safe havens and logistical support, things like travel documents, ID cards, passports, that enable Al-Qaeda activity. As a result of this assistance, Al-Qaeda has centralized its leadership inside of Tehran. Ayman al-Zawahiri's deputies are there today. And frankly, they're living a normal Al-Qaeda life.
Now, I want to remind you all that under the Obama administration, there was a nuclear deal with Iran called the Iran nuclear deal. It actually has a much longer name, but it's commonly referred to as the Iran nuclear deal. And that was actually one of Obama's important accomplishments because it took a more diplomatic approach that also included safeguards to ensure that Iran isn't building nuclear weapons. There were other European countries who played part in that negotiation and were part of the deal. And Trump just ripped it up. He ripped it up and then proceeded to essentially bring us to the brink of war with Iran. They did that by imposing punishing sanctions to curb, Tehran's alleged nuclear threat. They also assassinated Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, which put our troops in danger in the Middle East, by the way, because there were fears of instant retaliation, and they could still retaliate later in the future, which was just incredibly short-sighted by the Trump administration, but of course they don't care. The US also accused Iran of violating the Chemical Weapons Convention by supplying the late Libyan ruler Muammar Gaddafi with chemical weapons. That's one of the other recent allegations made by the Trump administration. But in all of these allegations, they have failed to provide a shred of evidence for what they're claiming. He made some strong statements about Al-Qaeda allegedly, now having a home base in Iran. Why is this coming up now if there's evidence of it? Where is the evidence? We haven't seen it. And also Saudi Arabia has much closer ties to Al-Qaeda than Iran does. Iran has historically seen Al-Qaeda as an enemy, and I'll get to details on that in just a second. But why is it okay for Saudi Arabia to have cozy ties with Al-Qaeda and we do business with them all the time? We sell them billions of dollars worth of weaponry. And that happened under the Trump administration. But anyway, there was a statement in response to these allegations by Iran's foreign ministry spokesman. He says this: from time to time, Iran's foes, the United States and Israel, try to shirk responsibility for the criminal acts of Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups in the region and link Iran to such outfits by lying and leaking false information to the media. And look, I don't want anyone to get the impression that I'm trying to make Iran out to be like, oh, it's just such a peace-loving, friendly, government. No, I mean, they certainly do engage in proxy wars. They do fund groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. So I'm not trying to clear them of any wrongdoing. However, I do think it's much smarter to engage in this situation diplomatically and ensure that there are safeguards in place so you don't, escalate war with Iran or escalate war in the Middle East in general, which of course there is a profit motive behind that as well. And so I want to now go to a piece that Mehdi Hassan wrote in the New York Times back in 2017. This was after the Iran nuclear deal was thrown out the window by the Trump administration. And here's what he had to write. Here's what he had to say. The relationship between the Salafi Sunnis of Al-Qaeda and the Shiite clerics of Iran is not one of alliance, but highly antagonistic and largely based on indirect and unpleasant negotiations over the release of detained jihadis and their families. The report said that Iran held onto senior Al-Qaeda figures not to protect or assist them, but to use them as bargaining chips with the United States and also as a deterrent against Al-Qaeda attacks. And so whenever a deal is made by Iran and Al-Qaeda, it's never made in this like friendly, like, oh, we're homies, so we have friendly relationships. No, they engage in these types of negotiations, favor for a favor, but we hate each other. And like, anyway, I have more, but I've gone on too long. John, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that you very well summed up our current relationship with the different states involved in all of this and why. What I'm curious about, so I have some thoughts about Biden, which maybe we can get to. But first of all, with Mike Pompeo doing it, and doing it with a week to go, one would assume that if a week isn't enough to impeach a president, a week isn't enough to prosecute a war. So why? I mean, unless he thought the idea was he could do something to get it started while he still has the ability to do so. If it's not that, is it just sending a signal with the position that he has, knowing that Mike Pompeo is a guy who thinks he's gonna run for president in 4 years or whatever? Why do you think that Mike Pompeo, like we know the substance of why they would be doing this if they were gonna remain in power, but since they're not going to have influence over this in less than 2 weeks, why is Mike Pompeo doing this right now?
I mean, at this point, we're speculating, so I want to be clear with the audience about that. But my speculation is that there was some threat regarding the Trump administration launching some sort of military strike against Iran, and that would be, this last-ditch effort to try to remain in power. I didn't think that would necessarily work, but I genuinely did feel that threat existed. Now, with everything that's happened in the Capitol, with these insurrectionists rioting and breaching the Capitol building, I don't think that it's likely that they're going to do that. But who knows? I mean, Trump is a giant threat. Not only to the safety of this country, but when it comes to international relations, when it comes to foreign policy, he shoots from the hip. He goes from, antagonizing people like Kim Jong-un and then bragging about how they write love letters to one another and they fell in love. You just don't know what he's gonna do. The only thing I know about Trump and his administration is that they're self-serving, self-dealing, and only think about themselves whenever they make these types of decisions, even if it means that people will get hurt in the process. So that's what I was speculating. I really don't know at this point what Pompeo's motivations really are. But what I do know is that he's not being honest with the American people.
Yeah, I mean, I would have assumed that if you hadn't told me what the story's about yet. But yeah, you're right. You're right. So going forward, is this potentially one of the areas where, like we think Biden being the guy, his attachment to the Biden administration, that gives us, or the Obama administration, that gives us a lot of pause about his willingness to do a number of different things, including overall his philosophy of dealing with the Republicans. But is it possible that from the point of view of the Iranians, or anyone, any foreign country for which our relationship has degraded, which is I think all of them, that Biden being the one helps to more quickly go back to the state of our relationship back under Obama, that Biden had been involved in that, he's bringing in some of the people who've been involved in that. Like if you wanted to get back to the Iran nuclear accords, it seems like a pretty quick shortcut to it, knowing that they don't have to deal with Pete Buttigieg or whatever, like, and God only knows what he's gonna do, or whoever, Beto, I don't know, that it's gonna be a guy who was actually involved in the process last time and hasn't given me any specific reason to believe, to assume that he wouldn't work towards it again.
Yeah, I think Biden would want to work toward it again. But the issue here is, and it goes beyond Iran, by the way. It has sent this message to the international community that any type of negotiation or deal made with the United States is fluid and subject to change depending on which administration is in power. So that might persuade Iran to avoid, diplomatic relationships or renegotiating or engaging in the Iran nuclear deal again. But I do think that it's in their best interest to do that because the sanctions. I mean, the sanctions. It is an act of war. I mean, when you look at. Look, say what you want to say, and I think it's legitimate to criticize the clerics in Iran and what they engage in with their own foreign policy. But the people of Iran have suffered tremendously as a result of these sanctions in the middle of a pandemic. Right, just difficulty getting the basics to their country to treat people who have gotten sick. So many people have died. It's just it's wrong, and I don't think that it makes sense to move forward with these sanctions. So who knows? Maybe as a result of those sanctions, they'll be willing to engage in diplomatic talks with Biden, and I'm hoping that happens because I don't want an escalation of war. I don't think that there's any appetite for an escalation of war among the American people either. So we'll keep our eye on the story and fill you in as we learn more. But Pompeo is a complete and utter disaster. Moving on, and I want to end the show with some positive news. It's positive, even though it's taken years and years for this to happen. But anyway, yeah, we do. Let's do it. The state of Michigan will be charging its ex-governor, Rick Snyder, in the Flint water probe. Now, this is something that's being pursued by new prosecutors. The prosecutors on this case previously spent years investigating the Flint water crisis, spending millions of dollars on it. And in the end, it became clear that they were not presenting all of the available evidence in the case. But here's what we know based on the pursuits of these new prosecutors, and it's a special counsel. Governor Snyder, his health director, and other ex-officials have been told that they're being charged after a new investigation in the Flint water scandal, which devastated the majority Black city with lead-contaminated water and was blamed for the deadly outbreak of Legionnaire's disease. So we still don't know all the details, unfortunately, about what the charges are, and understandably, members of Flint's community want to know. Like they're like, we want to know. We want to make sure that the charges really fit the crime here. Now, Snyder and a Republican, of course, who has been out of office for 2 years, was governor when state-appointed managers in Flint switched the city's water to the Flint River in 2014 as a cost-saving step while a pipeline was being built to Lake Huron. Now, the water, however, was not treated to reduce corrosion, and that was a disastrous decision affirmed by state regulators that caused lead to leach from old pipes and soil the distribution system used by nearly 100,000 residents. And lead poisoning is serious, especially for children. It can have a developmental impact on them. It impacts their brains, their nervous system. And so it's taken far too long for any justice in this case. And hopefully these new prosecutors and the special counsel are on the right path to ensure that all government officials who allowed this to happen under their watch face the consequences for it.
Yeah. You said that you wish that you knew what the charges were. What if I told you I could tell you what the charges are? Because they broke during the show.
Update. Okay.
They are. I mean, you're not necessarily gonna like the result, but it's nice to have breaking news. So, former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder was charged Wednesday with 2 counts of willful neglect of duty. They're misdemeanors, punishable by up to a year in jail and a $1,000 fine. That seems Seems a little bit light. The money is, and that's basically nothing. Up to a year, what does that mean?
He's not going to serve any time, even if he's convicted. Yeah. He's not.
Yeah.
He's not. I don't see it happen. That's my guess, obviously. I don't know for sure, but that's my guess.
Sure, yeah, and I would assume so too, or a smaller portion or something. I would say that if it was a year, I know, like some people serve far more, but a year to me sounds like a lot. But anyway, it is notable that apparently no governor or former governor in Michigan's 184-year history has been charged with crimes related to their time in office. According to the state archivist, consult your archivist for these sorts of concerns. But that's what he's going to be facing. I mean, it affected so many people, lifelong health issues that'll be caused from this. I mean, if it can produce a $600 million fine, how are the charges for one of the people most in charge of it facing $2,000 in fines? I don't know. That seems weird.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep our eye on this story, but in the very least, it seems like these new prosecutors are taking it seriously. And one other point regarding the ex-governor, he had known about the Legionnaire's disease for weeks prior to taking it seriously and informing the public about it. So that willful neglect certainly applies to his conduct. So again, we'll follow the story, give you guys updates as we learn about them. But for now, I do want to read a super chat comment that I really appreciate from Rudy Acosta. It's in response to our story regarding Iran. He says, of Mike Pompeo, we're supposed to believe Pompeo, who's part of an administration that didn't see the Capitol attack coming? Sure. Well, I mean, what's far worse is it's likely that they saw it coming. But again, that's being investigated, and you know that we'll give you the details once we learn them. Sierra Lee also says, as always, Republicans talked out of their behind today. 45 put their lives in danger that day and continues to put my life in danger and other people of color, absolutely. So for all of you watching live, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for your comments and your input. Our members only post game is next. And after that, it's happy half hour. Become a member, tyt.com/join. See you there.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Now, these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like